Images rooted in the real, plunging us into landscapes, communities, and very intimate settings. As the winner of the prestigious Prix Niépce, Ed Alcock's photography is currently on show in Paris. The artist's work has also been exhibited at the National Portrait Gallery in London and the Rencontre d'Arles Festival here in France. Well, Ed joins us in the studio to tell us more about that. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Olivia.
Now, the Niépce Prize that I just mentioned is the oldest professional photography prize here in France. Niépce is the man famous for having produced a photograph called The View from the Window at Le Gras in, I think, 1826, 1827. It's now believed, arguably, to be the world's oldest surviving photograph. And 2 centuries later, you're part of that legacy of creating photographs. How does that feel?
Pretty intimidating. Yeah, I mean, a huge honor, really. Perhaps I'm too close to it. I mean, it's very, very difficult to I mean, I wasn't expecting it. So very proud, surprised, flattered, and I don't know, what else could I say?
Oh, 200 years on, it shows that photography still has a certain power to capture our attention. And as the winner of that prize, of course, your work's on show at the National Library here in Paris, including prints from a recent series named Buried Treasure. Now, this takes us to a former mining town in the northeast of England. I believe you originally went there to find out more about a fatal accident. Tell us about this project.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with the story of my great uncle, so my mother's father, so my maternal grandfather's brother, who at the age of 17, according to the story that I'd grown up with, was killed in the mines. He left school at 15 and 2 years later was dead. I suppose this guy, Kendon, was the working class hero that my family needed, perhaps, to structure some kind of narrative. You know, I grew up in a fairly left-wing family in England. And he was this sort of mythical figure, really. But according to the story, because obviously stories grow over time, according to the story, my grandfather would have left shortly after his death, moving further south, becoming a farm labourer, where my mum grew up before moving yet further south to Norwich, where I grew up. So I had never been to this town. The town itself became a sort of mythical place. And I grew up, I was born in 74, so grew up through the miners' strike. Hadn't quite understood when I was 10 years old why my parents were so attached to what was happening in the north of England and in most of England at that time. But I suppose it became part of my mythology and perhaps part of the mythology of England. And about 3 years ago now, and I was awarded a grant from the Centre National des Arts Plastiques to make a new body of work, and it became this new body. So started visiting this place, visiting the people who surprisingly, really, welcomed me, but welcomed me because of this history of a great uncle. And over time, it became clear that the mythologized story wasn't quite the reality.
How interesting. You unpick the different versions of truth there. Now, there are some really striking portraits in this series. One of them caught my eye. André, Man of Steel. Steel there being a very sort of symbolic word. Tell us about your subject here.
So André, Man of Steel. André is a Romanian immigrant. I met him by accident. He was working. I mean, he lives in the town. He's lived in the town for 4 or 5 years. He was working on a construction site. The town is very, very run down. I mean, quite surprisingly so, really. I mean, entire streets that are boarded up. Huge problems of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health, and unemployment, obviously, because since the mine closed, in 1989, I think, there has been nothing to replace the industry that was lost. Andre moved there first. Well, he moved first to London from Romania, and then moved further north, basically because of the cost of living. The cost of living is slightly lower, and I meet him on a very foggy day. I think it was early January or early February, perhaps, around about this time of year. And he's wearing his overalls. Great. He agrees to pose for a portrait. I mean, this is more or less what happens in my work. I wander down a street. I see someone that interests me. I say, "Hi, would you pose for a portrait?" There's a bit of to and fro, and then they say yes, and then we start making a portrait. And just as I finished, I noticed his blue T-shirt underneath the blue overalls, and just asked him, "What do you have under there?" And he goes like this and pulls this Superman logo.
And there it is.
There you go.
There's
The Man of Steel is born.
Well, indeed, this insight into life, daily life in communities, your talent for capturing life in the UK has impressed many an editor and art critic. We spoke to the curator of your current exhibition about your approach.
He has often been compared to Ken Loach in his commitment to preserving the memory of workers and miners. You can see it in the Buried Treasures series behind me. He has a desire to be involved in a form of tribute to those who shaped the working class mining culture in Britain.
So that reference to Ken Loach, the comparison with the filmmaker, do you think that you share an artistic sensibility?
Yes, probably. I mean, not consciously. It's not like I try to, but I mean, I grew up with Ken Loach. You know, I mean, his first film, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I mean, the first film I saw in any case was Kes, from the Barry Hines book. So, I mean, I think Ken Loach, but then obviously also people like Barry Hines, you know, from literature along the way, inspires a lot of my work. Yeah.
And as a Franco-British national, your work has often focused on those two countries, originally in the photojournalism that you were doing for national newspapers. And one massive event that you covered was, of course, the UK's decision to leave the EU in 2016. You made a series of photographs inspired by that rupture. It's called Home Sweet Home. How did it make you reassess your home country, the UK, and the people you were photographing?
It's a very difficult question to answer because personally, I'm absolutely sure that remaining in Europe should have been the decision. It wasn't. So, I mean, I think that initially motivated the work. It was to try and understand what had happened, to try and understand perhaps also what perhaps people like myself, other journalists, had missed. Because I think there was sort of an overwhelming feeling in our community that the right thing would prevail. That's not what happened. And the UK started to slide, like much of Europe, towards a sort of populism. And on the other hand, I grew up in the UK, I grew up in England, and I feel very, very attached to the country and to the people, and perhaps also to particularly the very people that did in fact vote for Brexit. I grew up on the east coast of England. I mean, not a few miles from Boston. Boston is Brexit central. So I mean, 76% of the population voted for Brexit.
So that must have been a very interesting exercise for you personally. And of course, personal issues and questions are always there in your work, really. There's a very touching series that you made about your son. It's called Hobbledehoy, about that magical moment between sort of childhood, adolescence, before adulthood. Tell us more about some of those pictures, what you wanted to capture. For example, there's a shot of your son with, I think, his mother in the foreground.
So this is my son, Nino, and my wife, Muriel, his mother, in a bathroom in Crete, in Greece. It's actually the bathroom of a childhood friend of mine, whose parents have a place in Crete and lent it to us for a few weeks. And it's one of the first pictures I made in that series. And it was really, I suppose it was watching them. In this picture, my son is 6 years old. And I think it was really the realization that I had very little memory of such a sort of fusional relationship with my own mother. Now, I'm not saying it didn't exist, but if it did exist, then it's somehow been wiped from my memory banks. And I think that made me kind of curious and made me almost want to record what I was seeing now as if it was also like reconstructing perhaps my own memory.
And the camera gives you that opportunity to look back at things in a different way. Now, finally, we asked you what's on your cultural radar. You pointed us towards the paintings of Bilal Hamdad, currently on show at the Petit Palais here in Paris. What grabbed you about his work?
I think it's, well, for one thing, the exhibition is free, much like my exhibition at the BNF. And so, I mean, it feels incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for? Generous, really, to put such fantastic work. Now, Bilal Hamdad's work that I discovered for the first time in the exhibition, but it's hung with other works from the Petit Palais, which sort of puts them into relief, really. And the work is fantastic, very large scale paintings, inspired, I suppose, from the northeast of Paris, which is also where I live in Paris. So it felt like looking at home. But as anyone who goes to visit the exhibition will see, there are interesting little twists that bring the world of art into a place which often feels fairly artless.
Yeah, and I think there are definitely echoes of some of the social realism we see in your images as well. Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Today. We'll leave you with a glimpse of some of the work in that exhibition, Paname, at the Petit Palais. Otherwise, Ed Alcock's work is on at the National Library, the BNF, here in Paris, alongside other award-winning photographers working today. So do check it out if you get a chance. See you next time here on Arts 24.